All right. Fingers are crossed here.
Fingers crossed right here.
Fingers are crossed because for whatever reason, StreamYard this morning is being a little strange. So hopefully if it goes in and out, everybody, it's not impacting our broadcast. But anyway, good morning. It's Friday. We made it. Jose, how are you, my friend?
I'm very good. The weather has been a little bit nicer these years, and I'm not talking about hot. I'm talking about cooler because it was very hot for a few days and very humid. So
Really?
today we have something like 73 or 74 right now, and it's very nice.
Nice. Yeah, here in Colorado, beautiful weather here too. And Colorado, what people don't realize is we get the majority of our snow this time of year. So March, even into April, we get
Wow.
these spring snowstorms. And so what'll happen is it snows and it melts, and it snows and it melts. And it's kind of what we're going through right now. So today is going to be in the 60s, going up to the 70s by early next week, and then snow.
Wow. I never thought about that. I thought that it was worse, I don't know, November, December, and then so on.
No, I mean, in December, there's lots of times here where you can wear shorts.
Oh my goodness.
Well, it's really surprising because people think of Colorado, they think of the advertisements from the ski industry, right? Which is mountains and snow and people covered in, and it's like, oh my goodness, fighting off the bears and what have you. But Denver itself in the Front Range, where most of the people live, is along the base of the mountains. So we're not actually, I live next to the foothills, but not actually in the mountains. Let's see. So good morning, everybody. So we have one LinkedIn user who says good morning. So everybody let us know where you are. So as I said, I'm in Loveland, Colorado, so north of Denver, and Jose is in South Florida, beautiful South Florida. And every Friday at this time, if you're new to this, so 8 a.m. Mountain, my time, 10 a.m. East Coast time for Jose, and early birds at 7 a.m. on the West Coast, we do a live stream. And we're live on LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube. Currently not Facebook. Didn't know if you knew that or not, Jose, but I'm not on Facebook right now. And what we do is we talk about food safety. We're both consultants. We have businesses, and we absolutely love food safety. And what we're doing is kind of breaking up the webinar format, right? Where it's kind of this one-sided thing where there's a topic and an expert talks. This is interactive, right? So we have a topic, and what we do then is talk about this, and as people ask questions, and so this is about you. This is about your questions. So throw us questions on our topic of the day, and then we'll discuss those and give you our opinions on them and all these type of things, right? Because there's a lot going on right now. And of course, if you have questions afterwards or you need to get a hold of us, you can see here on the screen is our emails. So we encourage you to reach out to us. So seeing some friendly names here, Jose, in the chat that I know. So Helen, always awesome to see you. Hope you're doing well. Baja's here, awesome. Love to see him. Oh, Cocoa Beach. Laura's in Cocoa Beach. So I don't think where's that in relation to you, Jose?
That is, about, I'm going to say 3 hours. About.
Okay.
Close, yeah, it's close to Orlando. Closer to, about an hour, but it's not that bad.
Okay, yeah, that's not that bad. So we got Los Angeles. I mean, some of these sorry. So Nathan's jealous of you, Jose, with your in Toronto.
I already sent him a reply. Yes, and actually, Nathan, we were saying this morning. Actually, when Bryan was asking me, I'm about 70. What? Let me tell you right now exactly. I'm 72 right now. Not even one cloud. Totally blue sky with the sun out. It's a perfect weather.
Beautiful. Yeah. So Nathan, I lived in Buffalo, New York for 5 years. So not too far from you. So we got quite a bit of the weather like you got, except for we got more snow effect or lake effect than you guys did. So we were kind of stuck on that side. So one of the things for the newbies who are joining us this Friday that we do is we all have a drink together. So
oh yes, here is mine.
Coffee. Jose has his tea. So please pick up whatever drink that you have handy with you and join us in the morning drink. Here we go. So good, very good. I was saying last week, Jose, when you were off doing all the things that you do, we had a guest host on who was talking about food safety and caffeine, right? And so it's amazing, right? We take all this caffeine into our bodies and we don't even think about it, right? So it was a really, really good show. Very interesting topic.
Yep, I know a little bit about coffee, and that was one of my first experiences in learning about food.
Mhm.
Uh, Most likely you discussed this, Brian, but understanding that coffee actually is a drug and is
Yeah,
not food. You know, the caffeine is a drug and not food, and is food if it's below certain ppm, certain concentration in
right.
the beverage. Then it's approved to be used as food.
Yeah, it's interesting how these things and these regulations evolve over time, right? Because I mean, Coke and these type of drinks have been around forever. So the regulations
Yep.
were built around how they were doing things at the time, right? It's always based on that context. Um,
Yeah.
very interesting. So very cool, Lalino. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. He's got a little coffee, a little coffee, little symbol there.
Yep. Okay. So
Oh,
I'm not sure, guys, if you are, because for a few seconds,
yeah.
Brian, your image froze.
Yep. And so what happened on my side is what
Yeah. So thanks God for all of the others that are here. We can continue the meeting. Even if Brian is not for a few seconds here. And what I'm going to do is to can you hear me now, Brian?
Yep. Can you see me?
Okay. Yes, yes. Quite blurry, I'm going to say, but
Oh,
I can see that you are there.
huh. Okay. Well, we'll try and work through this. Everything looks fine on
What?
my side, which is weird. Very weird. Um,
That's strange.
all right.
Maybe someone that is hearing us can tell if Brian is there, or if it's me, the one that I losing the signal, and you guys may help us identify where is the problem. But, but anyhow, what we are going to be talking today, it's about crisis management. That was the topic for today's show. Um, and the idea is to explain a little bit this section. Crisis management is a requirement. Uh, Brian keeps pausing. Okay. Uh, hey, Gary. So Brian looks okay, but then I have another. Brian is frozen. Okay, so I'm going to continue. So Brian will be here in no time. So the thing here, it's about crisis management. And whenever we set crisis management, we need to understand what is a crisis situation. That is the whole thing. We need to go like I remember from my best instructor. You are now back, Brian. Okay. So I was telling the audience about crisis management, and I started explaining that we need to go by the intent. And
Mhm.
the key here is how to determine what is the intent of the crisis management program. And this is something, guys, that it's actually very simple. Okay. What is a crisis when the FDA is looking for food safety, and actually the FDA is looking for the prevention of adulteration, which includes food safety. Okay, but if your product contains hair, for example, the product is adulterated and that is prohibited by law. Okay, that is going to be a crisis situation under FDA eyes. Now, following SQF, BRC, FSSC, any of the GFSI, yes, they are also there for food safety. Okay, so what is a crisis situation whenever food safety is compromised? And I'm going to say that because all of those standards do have their GNP portions, whenever the GNPs are not in place, most likely you may have a crisis situation. What's your opinion, Brian? Brian? Brian is freezing. Again, sorry, Brian, maybe you can hear me. So I'm going to continue, guys. So a crisis situation is whenever you cannot prove that the food is safe. And for this specific topic, one of the things that I'm going to say is this. Look, so in a food safety system, the way that I see it from the systems standpoint as an engineer is that we have a phase one, okay, which is and I'm going to make this kind of a brief, but is the receiving of the ingredients. So we need to make sure that those ingredients are safe for us to use them in our production. And actually, the FDA says that if you guys receive something that is adulterated, and remember that this is making sure that the product is matching exactly with the specification, okay, that is a prohibited act. You cannot do that. That is going to generate a crisis situation because one
Mhm.
of your ingredients is adulterated. Do you have something for that, Brian?
Yeah, and so I guess I'm gonna have to talk quickly here. Now, I think everything is wrong on my side for some reason, and so I'll just try and talk as I can. But definitely know.
Yeah, it's frozen again. Okay. So let's continue. Brian is our our frozen host today. Well, he's in Colorado, so anyhow, he's frozen no matter what. Um, okay,
Uh,
so yeah, Brian, but don't worry. We try to find out if you can actually reboot your computer or do something like that. Actually, I recommend that you reboot your router, and we'll be here in what 5-10 minutes. That may take you out of the meeting.
yep, I'll do that because that's much less annoying than trying to talk over this, though. I'll be right back.
Okay, good deal. We will continue. Okay, so that is a crisis situation. Anything that will somehow put in risk the uh, and it's not just the safety. Yes, it's the safety of the product, but it's the prevention of adulteration. And some of you, those of you that have been hearing for during all of these chats that I'm having with Brian, I'm frequently talking about adulteration. I'm not using the word contamination because I prefer to use this word because this word includes that your product could be adulterated with something that is not a food safety hazard. So if your products contain hair or if your product contains insect parts, very tiny insect parts, or if your product contains, food grade grease, your products by default are adulterated. Now, if it's a really incidental food grade grease or really incidental food grade oil or something like that, which is a minimum particle, and it's basically, it's kind of inevitable. There is nothing you can do in order to reduce that anymore. That's fine because that is exactly how we process food. But the point here is that we need to make sure that everything is done properly and all the GMPs are in place in order to prevent these instances of potential adulteration of the food with filth. So let's go and start explaining these because I've been explaining from I start talking about FDA. What will be another crisis situation for any company in the United States and most likely around the world for food safety? Not having the records. Remember that your records are the things that you use in order to prove that your operations were performed exactly as the requirements that you are following. The requirements that you are following are whatever regulations are applicable to your products and your processes, number one, and then whatever voluntary standard you guys decide to follow. And that could be FSSC, that could be BRC or SQF, IFS, or whatever you are, voluntarily following. All of those specific items that are in those regulations or standards or schemes are your requirements. When you do not have records and procedures and whatever to prove that you are consistently following those procedures and that your records indicate that your product is safe, that is going to represent a crisis situation. Okay. So, I mean, we are in the United States. Over here, most of the facilities are following SQF. So, what I'm going to do for GFSI reference is I'm going to use the SQF code. So, those of you that are SQF, one of the new changes in from version 8.1 to version 9, and I have that in front of me right here, is crisis management was moved from 2.1 management commitment to 2.6, where the recalls are located. That is one of the changes of the code this year. And if you go to that section of the code, in 2.6.4, you have crisis management planning. Again, remember that when you are looking at this program, what is critically important for you to understand is the intent. What is a crisis in a food safety system? And remember, anything that may adulterate the product is going to be a crisis situation. And if you don't have proof, in the case of the records, if you don't have proof that all of those activities, the GNPs and the food safety plan and everything else, are actually performed exactly as documented as your control procedures, okay, you are going to also have a crisis. So reading of this crisis management planning, it says a crisis management plan based on the understanding of, and look at what it says, known potential dangers. Question will be, which are the things that may cause a potential danger for your facility, for your employees in the city that you are located, with the other businesses surrounding your facility? All of the conditions that are unique to your facility, to your processes, to your products, to your ingredients, to your way of doing business. That's what you need to look. So, for example, if there is a company, and I'm just going to, reading the requires there, flood, drought, tsunami, severe weather events. Uh, so I'm going to talk about weather. Okay. If I'm here in Florida, which I am, and part of my crisis management program is going to consider, of course, hurricanes, is going to consider high winds, is going to consider flooding, depending on the zone of the different cities, whatever. But flooding is very and quite possible. And I need to consider losing power for weeks eventually. Okay, which happened in 2005 or something like that. We lose power for kind of a week and a half. Okay, all of those are going to be crisis situations. Why? Because food safety could be compromised. Now, in the case of a hurricane, the good thing is that any food facility can say, is coming, is coming. Oh, are you here? Yeah, seems like everything is working good. I can see your face very clear now.
Good. I was worried when I reset the router that it was going to cut you off. So good. All right.
Okay, Brian, let me give you a brief introduction. Okay, so we already I already shared with the audience that there is a change between SQF 8.1 and 9, and I said that I'm going to talk about SQF because most of the companies in the United States are SQF. I mean, it's GFSI, so the requirements are going to be the same for any other standard. And then I'm going through the crisis management in SQF in the version 9. And one of the things that I'm telling everybody is the first highlighted section that I have here is known potential dangers. And talking about weather, I said that if I'm here in Florida, I will be looking for flooding and hurricanes and losing power.
Right.
But maybe in Colorado, what will be a weather concern for any food facility there?
Yeah. So like on the plains, you have tornadoes, right? And so everywhere you live, there's risks,
Yeah.
right? So the people in Texas right now, from their big power outage, very, very aware, right, that there's big issues that you need to worry about for crisis.
Yeah. So again, those are those I'm going to say concerns, potential dangers to food safety, because one of the things that I was explaining to the audience also is that you need to look for the intent. What is the intent in the crisis management planning? That you're going to be looking for things that will adulterate the product. And I prefer to use a word from the FDA and not talking just about contamination. But I mean, they said also warfare and civil unrest, computer outage. Look at that one.
Computer outage. Yes.
Records and documents.
Internet shows. Yes.
Seems a little bit familiar to you.
Yes. How do you react to the crisis, right?
What else is here? Well, they added pandemic. Eventually, it's a potentially crisis situation. Thanks God that COVID, as of right now, we don't have any source, any evidence, as stated, that the virus is transmitted with the food. I'm still, I believe that with this scientific background that we should always keep, unless we perform a study and we are like the environmental monitoring program, diligently trying to look for that evidence saying that the virus cannot be transmitted with the food is kind of okay, we don't have any case, which is quite good, but that doesn't mean that was studied if it's possible or not, the transmission. Those are two different things,
right?
Well, but yes,
I think so. I mean, so we have really good examples. I mean, look at norovirus. If you're in a closed environment with lots of contact with people, so cruise ships and things like that, right? It spreads like wildfire, right? It's crazy. Yes. So there are models out there where viral transmission can happen really, really quickly. And so you need to take those things into consideration. Catherine had a question here. So crisis management been more traditionally handled in a business continuity? Yes. So with SQF, as Jose is talking about, under 9, they kind of rearrange some stuff, right? So you've got 262, 263, and 264, where kind of what we're talking about today resides within SQF. And Jose, a lot of times, I'm sure you see this when you go out and you audit facilities and things like that, people get these mixed up. They think that traceability is the same as crisis management and is the same as withdrawal and recall, and it's not.
And it is not.
Right. The way I look at it is, and let me know what you think on this too, is traceability, right? That process of finding where your product went and what ingredients you use and all these things is just a subset of the other two.
I agree with you. And look at this, Bryan. If I look at these 2.6 in the code from the systems standpoint, okay, is because for whatever reason, if your products are somehow adulterated at any stage, receiving, processing, or shipping, okay, it doesn't matter. At any stage, if your products are identified as adulterated, okay, adulteration by default in a system is going to be identified as a deviation from the consistency that you want to achieve.
Yep.
At that point is when the corrections and corrective actions are going to kick in, and this is principle number 5 in the HACCP. In systems, that is part of the continuous improvement. So we're supposed to be looking at that failure and then try to do something to prevent that from happening again.
Right. Well, and I think, right, so For people who are new to the show, one of the things that Jose and I like to do is, right, we dig down into the details and then we bring it back up to 30,000 foot and then we go back down into the details. So one of the things that always need to keep in mind with this conversation is what this links into overall from the overall system perspective. And one of the things I absolutely beat into my clients, I'm sure you do this too, is your food safety team is the core of your operation, right? At your plant, the food safety team is essential. There needs to be people asking questions all the time. Does this impact food safety? What about this for food safety, right? And so in these examples and your points around adulteration, this is where this all ties together. So if you have a power outage in Texas and your product is in the warehouse and you can't get it out and it's snowing outside and the temperature is slowly climbing in that, the question in the plant needs to be is, okay, we need to get the food safety team together to evaluate, to decide if we have a food safety risk or not. And to your point, if it's yes, and the product is potentially adulterated, then you need to take action. And the food safety team needs to be the group that manages that.
If you have a condition that may potentially, and again, I'm going to use my favorite word, adulterate the product, by default, you are in the presence of a crisis situation.
Right.
And that's when this program is going to kick in.
Yep. So traceability, right? 262, the act of the tactics of how do you find where this stuff went. 263, withdrawal and recall, right? So if you decide that you have something that needs to take action, here's what you need to follow. And then 264 is crisis management, right? Which is a bigger category. And to Catherine's point, that's what used to be called business continuity in the past, right?
Yes.
So crisis management is everything that can potentially impact the product, really.
Yep. And there are very specific requirements because in 2641, it says known potential dangers that can impact the site's ability to deliver safe food. So as you can see, just by reading that, you understand that a crisis situation by intent is anything that is going to potentially adulterate your product. Now, what is very unique there, Bryan, and for everybody that is hearing us, Bryan and I, a little bit before, going live, we were talking about in the European Union, it was approved an amendment to the food regulation there, including the food safety culture as part of the regulation. And that was 2 days ago on the 3rd, it was finalized. And in 20 days, the changes are going to happen. Okay. So why I'm saying this is because all of the responsibility for crisis management belongs to senior management. Is the SQF responsible for developing the documentation and training people and, having all the documents and records and whatever? Yes, it is. But at the end, the person that is the most responsible for this is senior management.
Yeah. Good point. And I mean, there's two things on that, Jose, people need to think about is senior management. What is senior management? So a lot of times in your SQF systems in a plant, you're looking at it and saying, oh, okay, well, senior management is the plant manager and the quality manager and the operations manager, right? That team of individuals that leads the plant is senior management for that purpose. And that's fine. But really for this category, what we're talking about right now, especially around withdrawal and recall, is senior management needs to expand. And it needs to be the company senior management because decisions need to be made beyond just the plant. And I think a lot of operations don't understand this, and they limit their exercises and their crisis management processes to just the plant. And they think, and this is where I think the confusion comes in, Jose, is they think that doing mock recalls is the same as what we're talking about with withdrawal and recall and crisis management, and they're not. And this is something that I figured out in my career, and I expanded my training dramatically. Quick little story here. One of the things I did at a previous company I worked at is we did crisis management scenarios for the entire company. And we would get the procurement and R&D and legal and operations and all of the people that impact food safety together. And we worked through in a big meeting a scenario. And we had people who represented FDA and all these type of things. We brought in a media consultant who acted like a reporter and went around and interviewed people. And the different tables had to make different decisions based on the information they meet. And it was a huge, huge eye opener to the company. And they now understood that during a situation like this, everybody has a part to play. And if people don't understand what they're supposed to do, they make it up, right? So if you're a sales guy and there is a potential recall situation going on in the company, and your client, let's say you're the salesperson for Kroger, right? And you're going out and selling products to Kroger, and that salesperson calls you, or that buyer calls you, right, and says, hey, what's going on here? You aren't going to say, I don't know, right? You're going to say, well, geez, yeah, we're having some problems at our plant. And you're going to start making some stuff up, right? Not on purpose, of course, but your customer needs to know what's going on. And so these weird communication channels start developing in the process. And now all of a sudden the recall coordinator is getting information back from the field saying, well, the customer Kroger is saying this. And you're like, well, where in the world did they hear that? Right? It's probably coming from your own company, right?
Yes.
So if in the recall and crisis management portions of this, if you just try and isolate this to the plant level, you're making a big mistake. Because part of what the regulation says too on the crisis management side, Jose, is that you need to think about alternate methods of supply. So if you are a manufacturer and you have a plant in Texas and your plant shuts down, how can you potentially get product to your customer from other locations? Well, not that it's your only plant, not much you can do, right? But if you have other plants or other methods where product is stored, you need to think about that.
Yeah, and you know what, Bryan? In my opinion, and I might be wrong, okay, but this is the way that in my mind I can organize business continuity and crisis management. In my mind, those are two different programs. Why? Because if you look at crisis management, that is related with anything that may impact the safety and the I don't know, the food being edible. Okay. It's just related exclusively to that specific product because we are developing food safety plans. Now, business continuity, I will say that that has a higher level in a system. That is how senior management or site management is responsible to coordinate not only with the case of a recall or potential adulterated product, but also figuring out how the company can continue running and can continue, somehow producing, even though that it was affected by this crisis situation. That's my point of view.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's why this topic is important to go over, is teasing this out, because as a company, you need to understand clearly what this means. Because if the quality manager thinks it's something and the plant manager thinks it's something and corporate thinks it's something else, you're in trouble.
Yes. Yes. Actually, Bryan, look at this. In the SQF code version 9, page 96, we have a formal definition for senior site management. Because I have the same issue as you. You go to a company and they say, oh, I'm the, director of quality control and I'm the director of production. So we are senior management. And go to the code, and senior site management says individuals at the highest level of on-site responsibility for the business. That means that if I look at your organizational chart, I'm going to be looking at the top of the organization. That is the highest level. Anyone below that level is not site senior management.
Right. Yeah. And keyword there is site. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. For the site, for the facility itself. So let me go back to page 51 so we can continue looking at the specific things about crisis management. So the SQF, and most likely this is going to be, most of these things will be GFSI. So BRC and FSSC and SQF and IFS and so on will require something very similar. The first one is that the program must have a senior manager responsible for this program. then a crisis management team is required for this. And
Yeah.
like you mentioned, Brian, very well, there is a lot of crossings between responsibility for food safety and responsibilities in this crisis management team. Because at the end, a potential recall of your product or product potentially affected by default is a deviation in your system, is a non-conformity of your food safety system.
Right.
So all the activities that we perform for correcting and preventing that same thing are the ones that will be, you know, triggered.
That's a good way to think about it. And really, I mean, because it's like the food safety team is kind of a subset of the crisis management team, right? Because food safety is only food safety. Crisis
Yes.
management is food safety plus everything else, right? Because there's going to be
Yep.
things that happen from a crisis standpoint that aren't food safety.
I agree with you. Yep. Because there are many, many other activities that will be performed at the same time that this crisis is running.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So then it says that the program must have the controls, the procedures that people are going to be following to determine, hey, what is the crisis, how we go through this. This is very similar at this point to potentially the controls that you have in place whenever you have a recall. Because at the end, a recall is going to be also a deviation in a system. So the
Mm-hmm.
procedures are going to be basically the same. And what is the main concern here? This is a food safety system. The next statement in the code says you need to take measures to identify and isolate the product that could be affected by this crisis situation.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a very, very good point. And one of the things that I emphasize really strongly, and this is where these two things overlap, under withdrawal and recall, is when I put together procedures for companies, Jose, I put together two procedures. The first procedure is the evaluation of the threat. It's the same as crisis management, right? So let's say that you have a report of illness from the field, right? So consumer says that the product made them sick. The complaint comes in through customer service as part of your complaint procedures, and it gets routed to the most senior person on the food safety team. And they say, oh, wow, we have a report of illness, right? So an investigation begins, and you need to determine if there's an issue. And let's say that the team goes through it and starts looking at it and starts finding some issues. Let's say that the pasteurizer, they find that there was some weird things going on with the pasteurizer, and they may have a bigger issue. So that process of going and reaching that decision and saying, we may have a food safety issue that may require a withdrawal or recall is a different mechanism than the actual execution of the recall or withdrawal. And people confuse those because the danger here, and the reason why you want to break these up in two, is that first process needs to be very, very methodical. It needs to be data driven, and you need to gather evidence. The danger is this is a very emotional time for a company, and they want to jump the gun. It's like, oh my God, a consumer said the product made them sick. We need to recall immediately, right? And people jump the gun. And once that horse is out of the barn, there's no putting it back in, right?
Yeah.
And if you find later that you didn't really have a problem, and this person who said they were sick got sick on something else, it's done, right? In the minds of the public, you have an issue, right? So you need to have that mechanism for deciding, do I have an issue? And once it's decided, then the actual mechanism for how you execute the withdrawal or the recall happens, right? So we need to notify FDA and the RFR, the Reportable Food Registry. We need to activate the team. We need to put together a press release, and on and on and on, right? Two very different things. And a lot of times that deep breath of, okay, we need to look at this and think about this before we pull the trigger is super critical.
Yeah. So when you mentioned, Brian, pulling the trigger, so you need to verify all the measures that the company is taking to determine that the food is okay or not, which is part of the recall. You identify the product affected, but actually is part of any deviation in your program. You identify the quantity that was affected, then you put that quantity on hold, Then you perform an assessment, and after that is when you take a disposition. What we're going to do with this product, well, that's exactly what is in number 5 in Roman numbers in 2641. And then the preparation and maintenance of a current crisis alert contact list. You need a lot of people to contact. So do you have that list with you? And this is one of the questions that I'm always asking when I was auditing and when I'm consulting. How do you know that that contact list is current?
Mm-hmm.
That's a very good question as an auditor and as a consultant. What is the
Yeah.
procedure that you have in place to verify that the information in that list remains current?
Right. And that can be a very difficult situation, right? Because let's say that you have contact information for a customer. We'll stick with Kroger, right? And okay, I need to make sure that that information is still correct. If you try and do a mock scenario, people may think it's real, right? You may end up having a recall when you were just doing a scenario. So you have to be very, very careful in your communications, right? And say,
Yes.
hey, we're just verifying that this phone number is still good for you. And leave it at that,
Yep.
right? You don't need to tell them why. You're just making sure. And part of that list too, Jose, and people miss this, right? Because they understand you need the list of the customers and the name of the salespeople and all these things. But that list for FDA in our example here, who is the regional coordinator for recalls at your location? Who is the district director, right? And ideally, and one of the things I recommend to my clients, I'm sure you do this too, get to know them, right? They're people. Right, just like you.
Yep.
And if they know who you are, and you call out of the, and you just call out of the blue, right? It's gonna be a much different reaction than if they don't know you, right? Is what I'm trying to say here. Build those relationships,
yes.
right? Your local people, your state people, right? You need to know who they are, and they need to know who you are.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that.
And here's
The
an
next
important one too.
the next requirement here is linked to that crisis alert contact list.
Mm-hmm.
Do you guys have sources of legal lawyers and expert advice? And I'm going to link this now. Look at this one, Bryan. I'm going to compare now the FDA with SQF. And look at this. With the FDA, they are very clear. It's written in the regulation for the preventive control for human food. It says that you are supposed to assigning specific responsibilities to the people that is part of your recall team.
Mm-hmm.
So the one that is responsible for calling the lawyer and the responsibilities of the lawyer, the responsibilities of the QA manager, the responsibilities of the senior manager, the responsibilities of salespeople. I don't know who's going to be part of that team, but the specific responsibilities must be assigned to someone in the team. That is implied in the SQF, but it's not as specific as in the FDA.
True. And remember too, under the SQF code, if you have a recall situation, you need to contact SQF and let them know within 24 hours. That's a requirement of the code. And if you don't do that, I think that's a major under the code.
Food safety crisis at sqfi.com.
Yep. And an important point here on the list of people that you're developing. A lot of people make the mistake, Jose, and say, "Oh, well, we've got a lawyer in our company. We're okay." No,
Not really.
You need a food lawyer, who specializes in food law and food regulation. And you need to develop that relationship with them in advance so that if you have a crisis, you can call them up 24/7 and they're on your team, right? Your internal lawyer is dealing with contracts and purchasing and mergers and acquisitions and business activities. You need a lawyer who specializes in food. And I know some really good ones, and Jose, I'm sure you do too. So if anybody wants to know the name of a good referral for some good food safety lawyers, we're happy to let you know who those guys are. They are worth their weight in gold, right? If you have a crisis situation, their advice and how they help you is invaluable, right? I've had to rely on them in situations in the past. And I was very grateful and thanked my lucky stars that I had that help.
And the next one, Bryan, is to have an expert advice, which is someone, it's someone from outside the company that can help the people navigate these issues.
Yeah.
Someone that better understands the intent of all of those things should be part of that contact list.
Yep.
And at the end, the last component here in the management, crisis management, is, well, whatever is your program must be tested, must be verified, should be reviewed at least on an annual basis.
Yes. And that's an important point, right? And so we're kind of reaching the end of our time. And part of this, to kind of bring this all home, is what we're talking about here is training, right?
Yeah.
You just can't write a procedure in your office and then go, okay, that's all good.
Yeah, I'm done.
No. No, because this is the golden rule of crisis management. So if it's business continuity, recall and withdrawal, all of these things, I can guarantee it with 100%, it will not go the way you think.
Yeah.
It's going to go wrong. It's going to happen on Christmas Eve, and the CEO is on vacation, and the head of quality isn't available, and FDA gives you a note out of the blue, and you're just like, and you have to manage this, right? You have to practice. It's just like anything else. And again, like I was saying earlier, this is not just for the food safety team at the plant doing a mock recall. The entire company needs to be involved in this training. And one of the things, Jose, that I found really, really valuable that I did in my company is media training.
Oh my goodness. Yes.
Yes. If you have people who are going to be interacting with the media, they need to know how to deal with that, right? So that is not only the obvious ones, right? So the corporate communications people and things like this, yeah, they got all that. But media goes to the plant. So if the local news station shows up and starts asking questions outside the plant, you got to be ready for that. You have to be ready for that. Who's going to answer those questions? When employees are walking out the gate, what should they say if an employee, just like this mic on here, right? If they come up and they shove a mic in an employee's face, how do you manage that, right? You have to practice, and you have to teach people this.
Yep. And remember that a microphone in front of someone makes that person a celebrity. So it makes that
right.
People talk a lot.
Exactly. Yep. So with this, and I mean, gosh, on this one, Jose, we could talk for another hour on this topic easily.
Oh, yes.
But I mean, guys, to bring it back home is, again, so traceability, crisis management, business continuity, right? The old terminology, and recall and withdrawal, 3 different things that are linked together and need to be addressed in your programs and trained on far wider than you think.
And the other thing, Bryan, and this is something that I personally recommend to anyone that I'm helping, any of my clients. This annual, you shall be reviewing and testing and verifying the system annually. If you don't do this 3 or 4 times per year, forget it. By the time that this is happening, nobody knows exactly what to do. Right. People need to practice that a lot. And you know what? Maybe at the beginning, in the original implementation of these systems, maybe you need to practice this every month. I don't know. Right. I don't know what will be the. I mean, there are some of us humans that may retain things very easily, but there are some of us that will need to practice a little bit more, and that's fine. We're humans. Okay.
Right. Well, so and think about, over the course of the year, how much turnover you have in a company.
Yes. Good point. Good point. And maybe those that are, changing are the ones that will somehow belong to that team. So they need to be retrained. They need to understand what to do.
Exactly. Quick story as we close this out here on why it's important in withdrawal and recalls to take a deep breath before you act. This is a real story. I had an issue in the past at a company I worked for where a state contacted me and told me I had listeria in my product and I needed to recall immediately. And I went, whoa, pulled together the team, started looking at the data. This was a hot fill product, Jose, over 175 degrees at fill for extended periods of time. Listeria doesn't like that at all. right? We looked at all of our production data. We pulled together the team. We looked at all the information from the field. Everything was perfect. No issues. I contacted the state and said, really? Are you sure? We'll do what's right, but this doesn't look like we have an issue.
Yeah.
The state came back the next day and said, we made a mistake. They had another recall going on, and they mixed up or contaminated the samples or something, right? They never told me. They mixed us up with the other recall, and they said, oops, sorry. If we hadn't done that and taken that breath, right, this would have been an issue, and it would have alarmed the public when everything was fine.
You know what? At the end, Bryan, we're all humans.
Mm-hmm.
And at some point, you know, there will be a mistake. Accidental mistake. It's not intentional. So that's the reason why I believe that you are 100% on that. Yeah. We need to be calm and we need to think.
Mm-hmm. Yep. You always need to ask those questions, right? It's the 5 whys in the house, right?
Yeah.
Are we sure? Do we really know what we think we know? Very important. And I think that's a good way to end this one out. So as we said, right, lots to talk about on this, and Jose and I have, you know, more information on this if you'd like to know. So you have our emails on here, so please reach out to us. We're more than happy to help, and we will see you back here next Friday. And again, right, so if there's a topic you want us to talk about, please let us know. We love the interaction here. It's why we do it, and the comments are amazing here. So with that, I think we'll close out for today, Jose.
Good deal. Bye-bye, Bryan. Bye-bye, everyone.
All right. And next week, I promise, well, everything will be business continuity perfect. We'll see you guys. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.